disk, right? And this is one that is, I don't know, Randy can correct me, but this is overlooked more often than it should. It's overlooked a lot, right? And it's either because they don't know or they forgot or whatever, but, what not to do is accept, again, your broken record, accept the defaults. And accept the defaults on a lot of things for pertaining to disk, right? So number one, we see so frequently that when people build SQL servers, they basically add disks and format and accept the default format allocation units, right? Please don't do that, right? What you want to do is format the disks to 64K, right? Allocation unit. That is a must. And the reason being is you think about how SQL Server works internally, right? Best practice is to format all data and log drives of 64K allocation units because data in SQL Server is stored in 8K pages, and those pages are grouped into 8-page extents. So 8 times 8 is 64. So with each page 8K in size, we get 64K per extent. And when your disks are formatted 64K, we've seen, just by formatting your disks to 64K, we've seen, 40-50% improvement, performance improvement, just by reformatting your disks to 64K. Hands down, right? Number one, we see this 4K all the time, but just going to 64K. Now, I know it's not, that's easier said than done because you're not going to go add disks and format those and move things, right? Benefits are worth it because your improvements will be worth it just by going to 64K. Now, along those same lines, what we see a lot is, let's talk virtual controllers, right? And Randy has this. It's like, if you've got all these great disks, even if they're formatted 64K, but you have one controller, that's like a 4-line highway. 4 disks, one controller, that's like a 1-lane on-ramp to a 4-line highway, right? You're just not going to get that throughput. And that's where we see high read-write IO, right? Because it's just waiting and you've got a problem, right? One of the best business, let me give you this example. One of the best examples I can come that I thought of, and I actually thought of it this morning. Like I said earlier, I spent almost 10 years on the Microsoft campus, and here's an image of the freeway next to the Microsoft campus, and this just tickles my heart. Well, now it does, but when I was driving in it, I hated it, right? So here's the Microsoft campus. This is Northeast 40 right here. This is Northeast 51st. And if you notice, you got this awesome, I think each lane is three lanes. So you got a 3-lane freeway each direction. But in the span of a quarter of a mile, you have one off-ramp and one on-ramp, and they merge. So you got people coming on and people going off. And then to add that happens again right up here, another quarter mile. You've got the East Lake Sammamish Parkway Road, right? So you got people exiting, hitting 520 here, but exiting onto East Lake Sammamish Parkway again. So this traffic backed up a lot because you had an on-ramp, off-ramp. And so this is like, if you don't have you got one, and maybe if they had more, it was just, you cannot, if you got 4 disks, you cannot have one controller, right? You basically have to be able to allow that traffic to come and go and not block it, right? So if you've got a lot of read and write IO, so here's some write, here's some read, and you've only got one lane to do that off a 3-lane freeway, you're going to experience latency. Don't do that. But hopefully this makes sense, right? When we're talking virtual controllers, 1 disk per controller, right? That's it. 1 disk per controller. Right, so you got and let's talk about it this way. You got a data drive, log drive, temp DB drive, right? Each one of those should have their own controller, right? And if you want to have one for backup, awesome, right? But you've got to allow that. You have to allow that throughput, and we see that all the time. So think about this, right? Think about it as an end-to-end process, right? An end-to-end IO process. We'll call it that, right? IO starts at SQL Server and it ends at ends when you're writing to the disk, right? So as a SQL Server as a DBA, you're going, man, this is slow, right? So you talk to your disk people and they're like, no, we're not seeing any latency or any issues here, right? Well, think about all the components that data needed to go through from your SQL Server from your query down to the disk, right? So it needs to go through to get to storage, right? So it's got to go through the Windows components, any hypervisor, any networking. Think about all those components just to get to storage. As a DBA, we have to think about all of that. We can't just think about SQL Server. And we can't just think about storage, but we have to think about all those components between there. And so disk controllers is a huge one, right? Networking is a big one. So we have to think about not just begin and end, or not just SQL Server. We have to think about all the layers and all the stacks between from SQL Server to storage. And it could be any one of those. So we have to think about it in terms of that, right? So when we do our full stack health checks, we look at all of that, right? We look at disks, we look at, we look at the controllers, we look at everything, right? Because it could be any one of those layers between SQL Server and the disk, okay? We have to think about that, right? So you want to spread the data across as many controllers as possible. You have to do that, right? But we see that one controller, many disks, and that's this scenario. You don't want to get into that scenario. The other thing, let's talk initial file initialization, right? There's another setting. Now, let me jump out and do a demo here because I wanted to point these out, right? This is perform volume maintenance tasks. And this is, these are here in, so I've got my local security policy, and I've got these two settings. I've got lock pages in memory, and I have perform volume maintenance tasks, right? And your SQL Server service account needs to be in both of those. We talked about lock pages in memory, right? It's not, I don't have it in here and I need to put it in there, but this service account needs to be in both locations, right? And what this does is perform volume maintenance tasks is basically for initial file initialization. So let me pull that up. All right. So, oops. So initial files initialization basically says, it speeds up the time and process when it has to like grow and, we say it this way. So basically but reuse disk space and initialize files, right? So it speeds that process up. So if it has to grow a log file or grow a data file or reclaim some space on the disk, that process, setting that speeds that thing up, right? And not setting that will cause, I won't say significant, but we've seen performance issues with that is not set. You want to set and add your SQL Server service account to both of those. And we see that missed a lot frequently. And those will both have a performance improvement impact on your system.